Last time, Bernard took a masterclass from Orbis Investments' Edward Blaine, who taught Bernard that his views on property weren't necessarily the ones a global investor would hold.
The property cycle is called the property cycle for a reason. It's a cycle. It goes up and then eventually it goes down.
He also talked to financial advisor Rod Dickinson about how to incorporate more exposure to investing overseas so he can prepare himself financially for a life post-rugby.
I'm really excited about his future. He's got a great base to work from here. If there is any concern, it's his lack of time. You know, he's a busy guy. It'd be really, really hard for him to spend the time finding a property that he really likes.
It's given me a sort of an insight as to how many options people can take, you know, in terms of investing or building their own portfolio or strategies they want to employ. While you're still playing sport, your priority is definitely your own craft and mastering that sport, but in the background, to be looking at different strategies and sort of building a team behind you so that your finances or your post-your career is being looked after.
Bernard's a fast learner and he's taken a lot from his masterclass with Edward Blaine and his session with Rod. So it's now time to find out what his financial plan looks like when it all comes together. Now my favourite part of the show is where Rod reveals your financial plan. Let's see what magic you're going to make happen, Rod.
There were three really main things that we were looking to try and achieve here. One was for Bernard to get a really good understanding of the layers of fees that are involved. Secondly was, you know, working through the property thing and seeing whether it's, I want the property because I feel like I've missed out, or whether it's a financial requirement. And the third thing was just making sure with the existing portfolio that he's got, and he really should be congratulated for the discipline that he showed up till now, just seeing whether there's any way that we can tweak that or diversify it to get a better outcome. With the environment that we're in at the moment around advice, that you really do understand what your levels of fees are and where you can turn them off if you're not feeling like getting value for money.
Understanding fees is an important part of Bernard's financial plan.
What we tried to do when we were doing our modelling was get you in a position where, through a combination of utilising some of your cash, perhaps selling down some investments, and then borrowing a little bit of money, we think we can get you into that property, have a flatmate, you know, sort of help out with that, with the mortgage, but get you in a position where your cash flow's unchanged.
Well, it sounds like, you know, Rod's going to put together a bit of a strategy for you, actually, so that great Australian dream might come true for you. But not only that, to be able to diversify more around the world.
Absolutely. I think from both from a country perspective, so getting more global exposure, but also from a diversification of style as well, which is equally as important.
How has this been for you as an experience? Because it's not easy to talk about money, right? It's actually quite confronting.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I suppose, you know, speaking with Rod and talking about the sort of different strategies there are in place, talking about the different markets, you know, emerging markets, potential overseas, rather than just having that focus on what we know here in Sydney or in Australia. It's educational, but it's also tough. Speaking about your finances is probably something that we all don't want to do, or we don't like to do, I suppose. So it's good, and hopefully, you know, with what I'm doing, it can help someone else. A big side of it is trying to be proactive. You know, I've been fortunate enough to be playing for a number of years now, but to be proactive with things outside of my rugby. So, you know, trying to put things in place now that is going to set me up long term, and also not being afraid to ask for help, to go out, seek help, seek advice in those areas, and you know, I'm sure it will pay off in the future. Yeah, because at the end of the day, you guys are putting your bodies on the line big time. And also with the insecurities of rugby or the unknowns of rugby, that our career can end, you know, tomorrow. You never really know when the last game is going to be. Well, I think Rod and I would both agree you deserve every success, and we've loved having you on the show. Thanks for being with us. It seems like Bernard has understood the value of having a winning team around him in money as well as sport. And he's also learned his lesson from Edward Blaine that Australians' passion for property is not necessarily reflected in other places around the world, for good reason. With all these lessons, Bernard's moving forward, and we can be sure he'll use that same determination to achieve success in money as he's done with his career in rugby. I suppose just having a plan in place, you know, and asking guys in the know. So using your advisors, if they've got a plan and you believe in that plan and you stick to that plan, knowing what that's going to achieve in the long term. suppose being in Sydney and the bubble that we have here around the property and our perceptions or our concepts about the Australian dream, owning your own bricks and mortar is very different, I suppose, overseas perceptions and how they see it. So that cycle is definitely something that gives you assurance, that you don't have to get in straight away, that you can wait and try and get the perfect time.
Most important reason to stay diversified is that it gives you a happier life and it makes it more likely that you stick to your investment goals. Because you're diversified, you're more relaxed and you can say that isn't going to bankrupt me, it isn't going to change the way that I live, or it's not going to hurt my children. So I can sit on through it and look for the long term, and on a 20 or 30 year view, it won't matter.
Bernard Foley may have been caught out by the big moves in the property market, but when it comes to the stock market, he's scoring some good investments. For more, I'm joined today by Rod Dickinson, the director at Altus Financial, who's Bernard's financial planner on the show, and by Tony Gangemi, who is from Morningstar, who's our research partner on this program. Welcome to both of you.
Hi.
Thanks, man.
Well, Rod, it was an interesting journey with Bernard because you took on a client who knew a fair bit already. I mean, Bernard's got an economics degree, he's no dummy when it comes to money, but there were still things he had to learn. What was your first take when you met Bernard?
Look, Bernard's obviously very smart, very clever and experienced, but I think he understands what he doesn't know, and so he was keen to seek advice and try to sort of work out where there was gaps in his portfolio.
And one of the big things that you worked on with Bernard was, diversifying his portfolio. He had some direct equities, in Australian equities in particular, quite a lot, but he didn't really have global. For those watching at home that are thinking, oh, what's Bernard investing in? Talk to me about the difference between, say, owning a managed fund or owning direct equities. Sure.
I mean, the most simple way to explain it is you're paying somebody to do the stock picking for you by investing in a managed fund. So they're effectively using their skills, their experience, their research to try and find the best outcomes for you as an investor.
Okay, and Tony from Morningstar, you saw Bernard have a bit of FOMO on property. Sure. He thought he'd missed out, but Rod opened his eyes to the fact that, and his money master Ed Blaine, that anywhere else in the world no one would be thinking like that. When it comes to investing, how important is it to do your own research via just have a financial planner tell you? What do you think?
Absolutely. Look, we obviously we want to ensure that our clients, whether they're advisors or and retail investors, have access to all the information at their disposal. And some of that is around obviously equities and also managed funds as well. And having the independent research of Morningstar sitting behind that and doing the whole analysis of those portfolios and those investments for you just makes it a little bit easier when determining what type of investment to be putting your money into. In terms of, I guess, the different types of investments, and we've talked about equities, Rod, and managed funds. Obviously, there's two different buckets there. Equities is a direct investment, and obviously managed funds as being one that provides a lot of diversification. And I think that's where I think Bernard would get a lot of benefit from. The ability to actually invest in a managed fund which actually diversifies his portfolio rather than a direct security. So having access to investments that probably he wouldn't normally have actually been involved in, and property was one of those. There are managed funds that obviously just basically have a mandate around property investment.
Yeah, that's true.
I think one of the things in Bernard's situation is that he's really time poor as well. So he doesn't really have the time to research direct equities himself. So whilst he might have had what some people would call some blue chips in there, he doesn't have a lot of time to manage that professionally. So he's got to manage his career.
Well, he didn't even have time to look for a house, did he, Rod? No. You were saying to use someone to do that. Literally every time we try and contact him, he's somewhere, he's South Africa, he's overseas, somewhere playing. So that's the downside of such a full-on career, isn't it?
That's right, and that's where someone from an advisor's perspective, a firm like Morningstar becomes very handy for us, because we can utilise their research on both direct equities and managed funds to try and tilt portfolios in a way that meets someone like Bernard's needs.
And look, Bernard's not your average Aussie, let's face it. I mean, we've seen he's an elite athlete. What should the average Australian be taking from Bernard's story?
Look, I think that this FOMO, this fear of missing out, is pretty consistent across everywhere, and that there is no exact right way to get from where somebody is now to where they need to be in the future. There's multiple ways that you can get there, but if you can marry it up with how comfortable you are and the risk that you need to take to get there, and seek some professional advice to help you have that as a sounding board, it makes the whole journey a little bit easier.
Yep. And Tony, Bernard's pretty young, still in his 20s, late 20s, but how important is it, do you think, for people in their 20s watching this to start now, whether it's do their own research, talk to a financial planner?
It's very important, Vanessa, and I've got young teenage kids as well, and working at Morningstar has really opened up my eyes to the long-term investment strategy, and I'm trying to instill that on my kids as well, and I think people in their mid-20s should be thinking about how they can set themselves up for life, because it is a long journey.
Yeah, how are you teaching your kids? I mean, I've got teenagers too. Are you gamifying it? Because if it's not on an iPhone, it's not all that popular.
Look, it's about saving your money and looking at investment opportunities.
So are your kids investing in anything?
Look, my daughter isn't. My son is actually looking at a couple of shares.
Okay.
He was interested at one point in time. I think that sort of died off when Fortnite came out. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously, you're in your mid-20s. You need to start thinking about your longevity of your financial future. And I think it's important to look at all the tools at your disposal. Obviously, Morningstar is just one of the many tools out there in the marketplace. Looking at a trusted brand to help you find those investments is very important. On the other side, there's no reason why you can't go out and look for a financial advisor. I think having a financial advisor is very important, especially if you're not sure about what you're doing. A financial advisor has access to all the tools and all the information as well. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. I think the number's about 20% of Australians are only seeking advice.
Well, 2 out of 10, right? Yeah. So that's not a great result. How are you connecting with people, Rod, to get those numbers up?
Yeah, look, I think that in the future it's going to be digitally, to try and connect with particularly those sort of younger guys in a digital way that fits with their lifestyle and the speed at which everything's going. I think coming back to your question about that sort of average or particularly the younger guys, something like a managed fund where they take away the investments that can hurt you, or try to take away the investments that can hurt you, or the direct equities that may not perform as well. It's an easier way to get into the market, particularly if you've got a little bit of savings per month that you can put into it as well.
And how much is enough? Because I know sitting at home, people are going to be like, well, I don't earn what Bernard Foley earns. Most of us wish we did, but what can you start with?
Look, as little as $2,000. If you've got $2,000 and maybe $500 a month, $300 a month, that'll enable you to start the ball rolling, and it's amazing what compounding does to something like that over a long period of time. So if you start early, start small, and be confident that you've got that cash flow to meet that, then ultimately the results will surprise you over time.
Well, look, one of the things that OneView have done, who are bringing us this program, is create a model where people can invest $50 a week. And, I think it's a minimum of $2,000 to become an investor. So if you're over 18, you can start with that amount. And it's so important. I mean, Tony, the magic of compounding. How have you explained that to your teens?
I was about to say that, Vanessa. I mean, one of our most top-rated funds, if you were to invest $1,000 12 months ago, it would be worth $1,200 today, just based on compounding.
So $200 for doing nothing.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. And you put that to be $10,000, and the numbers are exponential.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Okay.
So it's about picking the right investments, the right managers, working with the right people, and let the money work for you.
Yeah. Well,
I think also that experience of watching markets move around a little bit. In that case, December last year, the numbers may not have looked anywhere near as good as that, but they bounced back fairly quickly. So
that's where the manager comes in.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. So seeing markets move around and being comfortable that that's going to happen will allow sort of investors just to make that longer term call.
Well, that's Tony and Rod. Thanks both of you for your time today. That's a wrap of this edition of The Secrets of the Money Masters.